On the Sunday Nation, moment of truth for big names in nominations, and this of course is a focus on hotspots as party primary D-Day looms. Maybe what, Jared, you have the inside eye on some of these things. Of course, the Sunday Nation is talking about Mike Sonko versus Peter Kenneth in Nairobi. That is for the Jubilee ticket. Of course, Kiambu versus William Kabogo versus Ferdinand Waitito, Jack Ranguma versus Professor Nyang' Nyong'o. There's in Kitui, David Musila, the Wiper chairman, versus the incumbent, Dr. Julius Malombe, Joseph Ndathi versus Anne Waiguru for the Jubilee ticket. And in Ruaraka, one that has been very fiery, Elizabeth Ongoro, nominated senator, versus Tom Kajwang, the incumbent. What is your take on these hotspots, so to speak, ahead of the nominations?
Thank you, Ben, for inviting us once more.
It
is true that there is cutthroat competition this time, and many aspirants are angling themselves to clinch their respective party tickets. As you know, the country has been stratified into zones, and this zoning is dictated by the dominant political party. So, for instance, if you come to Luo Nyanza, where I apparently come from, if you are in ODM and you apparently get very lucky to clinch the party ticket, then that is as good as enthronement on the 8th of August. So that has therefore attracted a lot of attention. People, going for each other so powerfully. Because they know that therefore marks the end of an election. Nomination is as good as a general election. So you have particular candidates who have expressed interest. For instance, you talked of Professor Nyong'o for Kisumu, pitting himself against the incumbent Governor Jack Ranguma. And, the tempo is fever pitch. Everybody is going for the jugular.
Right.
But we do know also that in light of the new Elections Act, that bars people from moving or decamping to a different political outfit, that has made it more difficult for
We need to check your microphone a bit, Jared. Prof, is what Jared is saying what we are going to see in terms of what is going to happen? For example, these cutthroat battles here we are seeing for the nominations. If one loses, is at the end of the election?
For the next foreseeable, thank you, Ben, for inviting me again. For the foreseeable future,
yes,
really for the losers, that's the end of the road. Because the door to nomination will be more or less locked, and the door through the electoral process will have been locked as well.
Okay.
One of the most interesting things in these cases is the scramble for the governorship position, gubernatorial seat. Clearly, the dictate responsible for these challenges largely is restricted to people who have resources. Because as is common knowledge, governors have basically been hoarding. In fact, if I was taking knocking people out by the governance section of the Constitution, all of them will basically be going home because they have grossly mismanaged resources of virtually all the counties. But because that's where, that's the second most powerful in terms of attraction for political power and the political patronage, all these people who are fighting for these jobs have a fairly solid background and they have money. So the major thing here, we are not likely to get the best candidate. We're going to get the one who has money and the one who has created the longest lines of patronage.
KK is here with us. We'll see if he agrees with you or not. In Embu County, there's a Jubilee governor in office.
Yes.
Do you agree that whoever has a Jubilee ticket wins automatically? Because you don't have the Jubilee ticket.
If I did even have an inkling that is the ticket to being governor, I will not stand because I will not want to waste time and resources on it. I'll just say that I think two things which have come very clear in Embu, and I'm sure it is there in a lot of the country. Yes, you need money to run for elections, but also you also need to take into account that actually wananchi, even those very poor, and actually, by the way, the very poor wananchi, those very illiterate people, a lot of times they have more rationality, political rationality, than even the elite.
Right.
In fact, the elite is more corruptible politically than the ordinary proletariat and the ordinary people. And you can see it even in the country. The people in Mount Kenya and Rift Valley and the other places who are following Uhuru, they are not following Uhuru because he has dished them money for that particular reason. Or the people who follow Raila Odinga, it's not because he has dished money to them. And that is ordinary, ordinary people. So I would say that, yes, it is true you need a lot of resources to do a serious campaign because, again, this is not a constituency, this is a county. Just the sheer movement of, traveling around and so forth, yes, that requires money. But I think you'll be foolhardy to think that money is enough to get you elected in the Kenya we are in today.
All right. Fair enough.
Personally, I'm of the few, or even foolhardy to think that now the party will take you in if the wananchi don't believe in you.
All right. There are those counties that have proven that to be correct, what you're saying. Dismas, as you make your opening statements, I want us to take a look at some of these battles that the Sunday Nation has outlined and just very quickly find out what you think about this. Starting with Nairobi, Mike Sonko versus Peter Kenneth. What do you see happening in that balance?
Well, we have said at times above number that political parties in Kenya are special purpose vehicles with their own shareholders. So in as much as Sonko may want to run to be governor for Nairobi under a Jubilee ticket, probability of him being given that ticket is almost zero. Because you recall there were so many candidates, or rather aspirants before who had wanted to run, starting with Sakaja, you had Bishop Wairimu, you had Dennis Waweru, and a decision was taken a long time ago that they need to step down. So even as we speak right now, Sonko is trying really to push the pedal to see whether he can get lucky at some stage or use it as a bargaining tool. Because in Kenya, the political parties being special purpose vehicles, we are not guided by any ideology or any philosophy. It's what the party leadership says, that's what becomes law. And that's part of the reason why my friend here is running on a PNU ticket, because the party leader had divergent views from the mainstream Jubilee. He decided to form his own political party. He was a clever man long time ago. He knew because of his divergent views, he would not be accommodated within the mainstream Jubilee. And the same is the case with Governor Isaac Ruto. You recall it's Governor Isaac Ruto and the deputy president who in fact established URP. But as soon as he got into office, because of his divergent views, he knew that if he sticks within URP or Jubilee, he's going to be kicked out.
How does Jubilee avoid a fallout from this?
Well, all these parties, it seems like they have the same constitution because they say for you to get a candidate, it's either through nomination or consensus. And in most areas of Jubilee, President Kenyatta and his deputy have got so much political capital that the award is going to become low. Like for instance, in Nairobi, if they take a decision today that it's going to be Peter Ken and Peter Ken alone, the moment President Kenyatta says that in public, then that becomes law. Sonko can run all over town, he can bleed, but he'll never ever take any position. The same is the case with my friend Jared Okello. If Raila Odinga was to go to Nyando today, and out of the 6 candidates, and he says, I'm running with Mr. Jared Okello, it's a wrap, it's going to be done. So we don't have a political party democracy in Kenya. And that's very unfortunate because it means the fountains of democracy are polluted right from the word go. Sometimes you get mediocrity because a party leader may go with a certain candidate, not necessarily because he's good, maybe because he's written a check to the political party. And it's reflected in the National Assembly we have today. When you look at the quality of debate we have at the National Assembly and the Senate, you begin to wonder that whether or not some of the people who are nominated actually have got the intellectual infrastructure we need. I would challenge anybody here to name 15 MPs at the National Assembly or even Senate. You will be challenged because they will not made any contribution, because a good talent is frustrated at the party primaries.
All right. There's a pattern here that is emerging in some of these make or break counties where the incumbent is facing a very also popular candidate in the party. There is Kiambu Kabogo versus Waititu. There is Kisumu County, Jack Ranguma, who is vying against Professor Nyang' Nyong'o, a confidant of the party leader Raila Odinga. There is John Root versus Thomas Modego in Taita Taveta. David Musila, who is the party chairman, Wiper, versus incumbent Julius Malombe. And there is Kirinyaga, Anne Waiguru, former devolution CS, who many have seen as a front runner for the Jubilee ticket versus the incumbent Joseph Ndadi. Jared, how do the parties, survive these balancing acts?
Well, it's a tightrope and a very delicate balancing act, as you say, because there are people who are perceived to have worked tirelessly for various political parties. For instance, you have Professor Nyong'o, whom you have mentioned there, who has been the party's Secretary General, ODM, since its inception.
Right.
And, at a mundane level, people would therefore say that Nyong'o is perhaps perceived to be the closest to the powers that be, and hence have a higher stake in terms of that nomination.
Right.
But what ODM has done, and let me speak for my party, we have had issues to do with bungled nominations in the past, part of which has
Is your
been...
party for Kenya or ODM?
ODM. ODM. Okay. Part of which has been because you have a national function
Right.
of nominations cutting across all the counties, across all the constituencies, across all the wards within the Republic of Kenya. That therefore presents a very big challenge to a political party. So what we have done is to try to stagger the nominations. To the very maximum, we are doing 3 counties per day. In most cases, only 2 counties per day, so that we have absolute concentration in only those 3. And it begins on the 13th, ending on the 26th.
Yes.
And not every day is a nomination day. So we also have a day off that we can reflect, retool, and rearm ourselves with certain misgivings that may be reeling their ugly heads into the system. Of course, as you know, most senators are now going to run to become governors, simply because they have noted that there are very less powers at the Senate, and because they are interested in controlling the billions that are channeled to the counties, they have all run to become governors. These are senators who have names existing on the ground, both at the national stage and within their counties.
Right.
And of course, again, you have the incumbents who are trying to, protect their kingships. So it's going to be really a very, very delicate balancing act as we move forward. But I think what must therefore happen,
Yes.
let the will of the people prevail. Dismas has alluded to the fact that most political leaders or party leaders are angling themselves or gravitating towards particular candidates to the detriment of popular candidates.
Right.
That must stop, so that the will of the people is reflected at the ballot, not just for the nominations, because that is actually a precursor of what is going to happen in August.
Prof, what
so
do you
once
think?
this is messed up at this point, definitely the elections will be messed up, and we will have no one to blame.
All right.
Actually, the points that Jared are making are quite valid. I want to extend them by stating that if you look very carefully, a lot of the senators, or a number of the senators who are challenging governors, are people who have been in the center of national politics for quite a long time, and who are basically, you could say, are stalwarts of existing political institutions, political parties. Take Anyang' Nyong'o. You see, Anyang' Nyong'o for a long time served as the intellectual soul of ODM, National Development Party, that collection. And when he went to Senate, my thinking was that, considering that parties are what Dismas called special purpose vehicles, Senate would evolve into the intellectual center of Parliament, which would then be able to use information, facts, the law, and everything to give the national a rational compass. Now that has disintegrated And then in my view, it has disintegrated because the exercise of power in this country is around tribalism and money.
All right.
Those two things.
All right.
In addition, Ben, I wanted to make another interesting point. If you look at the people, let's take Anne Waiguru, for example, all right? If Senate had evolved into what I was talking about, then it would be able to make Anne Waiguru feel unworthy of public office, considering that she left office disgracefully. And if you take even others who have left their position disgracefully, they go out in disgrace, but come in through the back door and claim respectability. This is really what is a problem is responsible for what you are seeing here.
All right, all right. From where you sit, do you agree with this?
Well, I think one of the things which we must actually recognize is that, in fact, many of the members of the Senate, as they are today, many of them, and I will not say all of them, many of them are themselves not politically clean. They don't have a clean political legacy. And therefore, you know, in that sense, you can say that part of the failure of the Senate has to do with the fact that, you know, you're asking, you know, a criminal to be the judge. You know, and if you even check on how they have done and they conducted themselves, you know, you can see that they have to be shy because, you know, the same problems which the governors have, they committed them when they were in peace, or even they committed them for the nation before they were elected to Senate. Many of them succeeded to be senators because they had money. Because although the Senate is less competitive today, it was a very competitive position in 2013 because people felt this is the house of the, you know, of the elders and you know, political elders and so on. Okay. And, you know, with the exception of a few, many of them have very dirty, you know, political legacies, you know, and corruption was also part of them. So even as they brought those governors there, okay, to question them and so forth, you know, I mean, they had no real moral authority.
You don't think they'll be having some kind of advantage going into the elections?
No, well, now, you know, personally, I say, you know, God is very gracious because a lot of them, all the money they stole from Kenyans, a lot of it will go down the drain during these elections, okay? And that is actually the truth. A lot of governors, the money they have stolen, will also go to Wananchi through this process. Of course, they look forward to the opportunity to steal again. But again, God is gracious because only 50% of them will be able to recover if they ever do.
All right.
So that's
well,
what
Ben,
I would
if you
say.
allow me, just before you bring in my brother Dismas,
Yes.
you know, the main purpose upon which the drafters of the Constitution created the Senate,
Right.
it was to be an upper chamber where all the misgivings at the National Assembly could be sanitized at that level. But you know, they have received lots of resistance and dissenting voices from the National Assembly, including the time when they allocated themselves some money that they could use to oversight their respective governors. That was thwarted at the National Assembly level. But again, they also allowed themselves to come down to a level which was not prescribed by law. And having failed at that point, they're now trying to run away from their responsibilities in order to become governors so that they can have absolute control of these billions.
All right.
So I think we need to also respect the Constitution, paying fidelity to the tenets of these laws, so that at the end of the day, we have the upper chamber called the Senate that will be protecting the interest of the Kenyan Mwananchi. Lastly, my brother, Professor Oeri, has said that if we were to follow the law, then people like Anne Waiguru, for God's sake, ought not to run. This is a person who, well, she's still a suspect, but there are serious questions touching on economic crimes that she committed while in office.
All right.
So,
But nobody seems to have real evidence.
no one seems to have real evidence, but remember, the matter has not been disposed of by the courts of law. So
But again, if you permit me, Jared, honestly, even those people in the Senate, just do a count of them. Ask how many of them can, with moral authority, okay, even put a judgment on one Waiguru? How many of them, even in that National Assembly, can stand there and say, I'm a clean person all my life, and therefore I can stand judgment on Anne Waiguru?
Well,
So
I
it goes
think,
across the board
I think, you know,
what you're
one
saying.
person's crime
Yes.
shouldn't be used as a leverage for others, therefore, to enjoy the very trappings. A wrong is a wrong, regardless.
All right.
So
I'm
if there are serious questions touching on the conduct of one Anne Waiguru, then I think it is incumbent upon the electorate to stop her from assuming any other office. She has failed, but you know, let's face the reality here, Ben.
Jared,
Let's just a
Jared,
minute.
just one moment, Jared. What I'm suggesting
Yes.
is that this nation needs other organs. No, the political leadership cannot clean itself through the current institutions,
Right.
because they are convoluted from the bottom to the top. Therefore, the only saving grace, for example, is, you know, investigative journalism, a much more robust media. Hopefully, the judiciary can do a better job than it is doing at the moment. Hopefully, there can be other agencies. I don't know whether Wabukara will be able to bring the religious
But you don't
group
think
to help
the
us.
politicians
But the
can
political institutions we have at the moment,
Right.
because the people who are going in there now, as those who have been there in the past, on the majority of them are already, you know, are already unclean. They cannot pass judgment on others.
right.
Ben,
within
my
the
last
sense of
point.
Let me
morality.
let Dismas
Ben,
have
my
the
last
final
point,
words.
before you bring in Dismas, I know
Jared,
you're
spoken a lot.
distorting my thought process. This
I'm
is very
sorry.
critical. The institution that ought to have put measures against which people would therefore tinker with the law is the judiciary. But this is the same judiciary that allowed President Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto to run with such a serious charge on their heads at the ICC.
All right, fair
so
enough.
that has totally been muzzled. Now it is every system go.
Dismas, you have
I
the
think-
final word on
Yes,
this.
I think our biggest challenge as a nation is the morality of the Republic of Kenya. When you look at the number of senators who want to run for governorship, it tells you that they are following money. Our philosophy is horrible. I was giving an example earlier on. A friend of mine in the village called me a few days ago. He wants a donation for his campaign. He wants to become an MCA. And instead of telling me what he's going to do at the Kisii County government when he becomes an MCA, he told me, as soon as you support me and I become an MCA and I'm sworn in, please come to Kisii and I'll assist you get a tender from the county government. And that's the very reason why you're having everybody running to the governorship position and running to become an MP. If you ask Jared Okello why he's interested in becoming an MP, if he's very honest with you, he may admit that he's going to have a kitty CDF fund. And most MPs love that CDF. That's even when it was declared illegal, they manipulated it to ensure that they've got resources to say they're serving the national agenda. So I think for us as a nation, our priorities are upside down. We look at power as a factor of production. That's why nobody's interested in the Senate, because the Senate has no resources.
Right.
And when you're talking about the fight of corruption, it's not up to the National Assembly to fight corruption. You have the investigative agencies that are supposed to do a good job. You cannot start blaming the judiciary for poor investigations.
Correct.
The Directorate of Public Prosecutions must do very solid investigations, and the Anti-Corruption Commission. So if you present a lousy evidence before a judge, he'll have no alternative but to dismiss a case.
All right. That's why we leave it on that story. That is, of
Maybe
course,
there's one small point I want to put across to Jared, because he's a political analyst and so on.
30 seconds.
And say that, you know, Jared, I mean, you have alluded to the issue of ICC. And I think it would not be fair to say one of the reasons actually why ICC did not sustain itself is because the entire process itself was lopsided. If actually whatever at the center, wherever in the country, everything was seen to be even, all right, okay, the results would have been very different. But from the very beginning, at least for also a very large constituency in this country, this process was seen to be lopsided. And for that reason, therefore, you know, there are people who you think did not have legitimacy, but in their constituency, because they did not see fairness and transparency in the process,
right. But the
they
question
took a
that Jared
certain
was asking
position.
is, there were questions. It doesn't matter how the case was or who was guilty or not. But there were questions raised on the on the current president and deputy president in 2013, but they were allowed to run.
It is because, again, and that is the problem, especially for the Kenyan intellectuals. We move away from the reality check of politics. I would say this to you, okay? For example, we have a very good constitution, okay? But if that constitution is not in sync with the political culture that is prevailing then it's another generation which will implement that constitution. In the same vein, therefore, okay, it is one thing, okay, in the political domain, you do not look things on a straight line in terms of rationality or in terms of simple morality framework, okay? You have to see it. What is the consequence, okay, of the stance that you have taken? And therefore, the result is not going to be what you, from an intellectual, rational point of view, is what is going to happen.
But when you listen to Mr. Kirago's arguments, you have really to sympathize with him and where he's coming from. Right now, he's addressing his audience back at home. Because, the ICC issue is very emotional. And when he talks about the issue being lopsided, he's clearly addressing a specific constituency.
Yes,
but be that as it may, when you look at Chapter 6, the political leadership, the last assembly, the last parliament, they diluted Chapter 6. Because the intention of Chapter 6 was that if you are suspected as having stolen somebody's goat, taxpayers' resources, whether or not you've been found guilty, you do not run for public office. If there is sufficient, people just suspect you've stolen. But the members of the National Assembly decided to lower the bar so low, they said that the only time you can be barred is when you've exhausted all the appeal mechanisms. And we know the judiciary works in Kenya today. If you've got a matter today, it will probably take 20 years for it to be settled. So we have to blame the 10th Parliament for diluting Chapter 6.
All right. Now for the final, ultimate, last one.
Yes, Ben.
So much on this.
Yes,
Prof.
Ben. I also have serious difficulties understanding KK's argument. You see, his argument that you make a constitution, but if it doesn't support the rot that is going on, it shouldn't be implemented. The purpose of introducing it, the purpose of seeking change, is to be able to correct the rot, not to take the constitution, put it in the dustbin, then begin saying our culture is that we kill people, and you bring a constitution to stop us from killing people. But this was said
very clearly that the same political class diluted that Chapter 6. So it is not really, it is what it is. It's been diluted. Don't you agree?
So actually,
Ben,
the point I'm making is very simple, okay? The point I'm making is very simple. Even as we went to that constitution, okay, we went to it, all right, as a country which was divided. It was a situation in which, okay, we have very real, shall we say, cracks in our national political fabric, okay? That we have not contended with. And what I've made, the real point that I wanted to make was that, unfortunately, from where I stand, I don't see the current political class in either of the defines, okay, being in a position to bring us the order which we want in this country.
All right, we have to leave it at that. This was, it was a very good discussion, but we were supposed to take a look at two issues in these newspapers, and we have like 5 minutes. NASA principals in make or break talks. Jared, what's happening? When are you giving us a
Well, it could be today, or it could be a few weeks to come. Of course, what is perceived to be part of the deliberations, particularly recommendations by one political outfit, was purportedly sieved into the market without the authority of those who are concerned. But let me tell you, Adolf Hitler had a department within his government called Propaganda Department, which was headed by one Joseph Goebbels. And establishments operate very perfectly under that propaganda mechanism. That role, the world over, is now taken over by the intelligence networks. When you come to Kenya, we have the National Intelligence Service that would then present an information to the public and try to gauge people's feelings about it. So when we read that NASA has come up with a working formula, we definitely knew that that was the work of our detractors out there. What they're trying to do is to soil people's mind, particularly those who do not come from areas where the one who has been, said to be the flag bearer are coming from. When they say that, it is Raila Odinga, Kalonzo Musyoka, and Mudavadi going for the chief minister, and Moses Wetangula going for the National Assembly Speaker, you ask yourself, is Moses Wetangula in the Senate or is in the National Assembly? So these are matters out there to distort what is actually within the purview or the mandate of the NCC.
So you're distancing yourself from that
Totally. They are meeting today at the South Coast. The white smoke may come out today or it may take a little longer, but definitely we are going to have a
Prof, any chance that the white smoke might come today?
There are chances.
Actually, I was going to say there are chances. That meeting provides an opportunity to examine the formula I stated last week. Now, there are the four of them sitting with each other and asking, like we are five here, asking us to vote for each other who becomes the team leader. Right? Now, this is an opportunity to look at each other purely on the basis of how can I expect my colleague to espouse my agenda if I propose him? Or to what extent is he likely to throw out my supporters and promote his own? This is an opportunity for them, it's a reality check, for them to be able to ask themselves critical questions as what is good in the various combinations that they have got, what would be best for Kenya, not best for who becomes, because the positions they have been taking, those are bargaining positions. But the critical bargaining component is numbers.
All right. KK, what is your take from where you sit on what's happening with the NASA flag bearer?
Well, I think for me, again, I go back to what I said. I look at NASA and I see possibly one clean person there, but I don't give him a lot of chance. I'm talking about because I've been around for a long time. I can look at all those people. I can see, where they started, where they are now, in terms of resources and so forth. I know the positions they have had and so forth. I know the offices they have had. There's one guy who looks clean and who is making a very strong claim for it in the name of Kalonzo Musyoka. But of course, again, he doesn't have the largest of the numbers. So I can say,
so for you, it's about the cleanliness?
Well, no. For them, obviously, it's also about victory. Right. In all political games, you play for victory. Right. What I'm trying to say is that, I, as a Kenyan, not because I'm a candidate, but it's because I'm a father, I'm a grandfather, and I have children. And I have a legacy of Kenya to think about for my children and everybody else. Okay, I look out there and I see, now, who around here is likely to help us change this situation? And I'm not inspired. That's what I'm saying.
You're not inspired?
Yes.
Very well, very well.
Ben, fortunately for Chapter 6 has got a new disciple in the name of Kirago. I think we wish him well so that if he becomes governor, he can probably show other governors how to run with Chapter 6. But be that as it may, when you look at NASA, contrary to what Jared and Professor has indicated, actually a decision has been taken on the flag bearer. The reason why they're going to Mombasa for a retreat today is not to go look for pieces of paper and start doing some lottery on who is going to become a flag bearer. They've already decided. What they're going to do today is to start developing a strategy on how to manage expectations, how they're going to break this news to their customers, to their voters, so as to manage a fallout. And when somebody is expecting a white smoke to come from Mombasa today or wherever they'll be meeting, there's no white smoke. But the decision is going to be likely taken in the next 3 weeks. When I look at my crystal ball, that's what it tells me.
All right. Crystal ball, Dismas is crystal ball. We'll take a look at it in 3 weeks' time.
Yes. In fact, what has been provided is guidelines for rationalizing a decision that is likely to be arrived at.
All right.
A decision itself per se, I'm positive, has not been made. The leakages have been provided by other parties. But if you go along that, the question, and what I would like to deal with is what Dismas is saying, that these guys are going to play around with papers. No, what they are looking at, they're going to face reality. This is where, if you take this, you have a good opponent against Jubilee. If you take this, you have a level 2 opponent. You take this, level 3. You take this, you have no option.
Right.
So
Well,
it's really a question
all
of
right.
realistically looking at what are the political consequences. If you take position 1, what are the political consequences, position 2, position 3 and 4 and so forth.
All right, thank you,
After you have looked at that, then you can be able, the decision then can be released knowing that its impacts will be as expected.
All right, that is
And
where we
let
leave
me-
it
let
on
me-
the political pages. We are coming back for more. We have more time. We have another whole hour to discuss these issues. That is where we leave it on what's making headlines in the newspaper dailies, in the newspaper headlines rather. Of course, that expected looming decision by the NASA on the presidential flag bearer. It's a story we are keeping an eye on for you. Do stand by here on KTN News. When we return, we'll take a look at pre-nomination intrigues. Stay with us.